Good morning, Claire. Thanks for coming in. I did see you pop past the window about 10 minutes ago, so it's good that you've made it. Thanks for coming on the What Really Matters podcast. And first of all, can you remember when we first met?
Well, first of all, for me, it's lovely to be here, Ben, and thank you.
Good.
Thank you for asking me on.
No problem.
Well, I know we definitely met with the Hartcliffe meeting where we had the round table that I set up around tackling knife crime. And the response is, what works? What's effective? Goes to your podcast.
I did give a couple of, tips and things, but...
Yeah. No, you did. And we are developing a kind of action plan, if you like. So it was really, really useful. Thank you.
Good. And we will definitely touch on that a little bit later on. But that, Dougie, in answer to your question, is how did you get Claire Moody, the police crime commissioner, on the podcast? I said, well, I couldn't exactly remember how it happened. But I said, I think it's something to do with, we were at a meeting. There was positive talk about the things that could potentially support change.
Yeah.
And then I suspect I probably sent an email fairly soon after that, and Claire might have thought, oh, he was all right. Yes.
That's pretty much the thought process. Exactly that.
Great. Welcome.
Thank you.
So yeah, we go straight into it. And I'm going to find out a little bit more about you as a person, as well as you professionally, and how that links with... what's worked well in community in the past and what potentially could work well in the future. So first of all, what was it like for you growing up in your community? Positives, negatives? Paint a picture, whatever it was.
So I grew up in a rural area. It was a rural town, so it was a town. I wasn't in the deepest, darkest countryside, but grew up in a rural area. And that... there are lots of positives to that. I was very fortunate. My parents were both teachers. They taught at the local school, and so we were.
Was it the same school you went to?
Yeah,
How did that roll?
Yeah, that rolled how you might expect. I spent most of my childhood being mortified, just embarrassed every day of the week. It's kind of there's and they are lovely, lovely people, my parents, and I'm really lucky to have had them as my parents. They instilled in me the value of education, the value of learning, and all of that. But it's very embarrassing having your parents as teachers.
I mean, I don't know how you get around. Like, it's bound to be. It doesn't matter if your parents are really looked at as really cool teachers, nice people, all the rest of it. Let's be honest. Young people will always look at a teacher probably in a certain way. If it's your parents, how do you get around that?
No place to hide.
No. Well, maybe that helped you in later years. Who knows? Did you have any siblings or anything like that?
Yeah, I've got 2 older brothers.
Okay. Anything more do you want to say about that? Growing up, is that positive? Or?
I love my older brothers, and so they're very, very different. It kind of goes to this point that people aren't born as blank slates.
What do they do, just out of interest? Because let's hear the difference. So
yeah,
we'll hear about you in a minute.
My eldest brother is my next brother up is very heavily involved in climate change and works on basically climate finance for countries that are on the receiving end of climate, are most impacted by climate change right now. Yeah. So he's recently been in Nepal. He's and he's working with those governments to work out how they can develop their risk modelling, which means they can work with global finance to make sure that they're properly able to finance their government spending and the resilience. It's much more about resilience than an adaptation.
Okay.
And what those countries are doing to respond to climate change. So that's what the next brother up does.
Wow, no, that sounds amazing, because normally those countries are doing the least to create the problems, and then they're on the receiving end of the biggest problems.
Exactly that, and Nick works with those governments to...
he gets a gold star.
He
right,
definitely gets a gold star. And my eldest brother works a lot in the agricultural sector, and he's got brain the size of a planet and works on kind of supporting the agricultural sector and farming.
all stuff that makes a difference. If we don't eat, we don't live.
Exactly.
Impressive. Okay, so
no idea how we all three kind of wound up in such, well, again, different directions, and as I say, there's kind of there was nothing special about our upbringing, but I'm very proud of the pair of them.
Well, it sounds like you've all done well. And I mean, let's be honest, a lot of the conversations that we've had with different people that work on the front line, people from everyday communities like North West and other places across the city, the conversations we have, a lot of the stuff tends to end up being around, you are a product of the environment you come from.
Yeah.
And people there's no hiding away from it. It's obvious when you look at all the data, the research, the case studies and everything else.
Exactly.
And people can buck that trend, but it's then how do they do that and how do we learn from that? So it's always nice just to get an understanding of where people have come from. So I mean, what kind of things were you doing when you were growing up then? So you were growing up and when you say in the countryside, where? Like, where? Was it in Somerset? Was it a certain community? What were you doing for fun?
It was on the border of Oxfordshire and Gloucestershire.
Okay.
So, sort of between Oxford and Cheltenham, that direction. Okay. What did I do for fun? It's always really boring when people see you have to put on CVs or whatever, what you do outside of work and that kind of thing.
It's only boring when people say, I make it up because they think people want to know it. I want to know if you enjoyed playing Tiddlywinks, let us know.
That would be interesting. That would be
Would
fun.
it?
I am a reader and I'm a walker.
Okay.
And, I have always been a reader. I love reading books and that kind of thing. And I do actually like being out in the countryside. Probably more so now actually than when I was a teenager. We did live near meadows, so I did used to go up the meadows with a book and go swimming in the river then. I wouldn't swim in that river now, sadly, but we all know the state of rivers. Yeah. But also like any teenager, top of the pops, music, friends, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, what you just said then, it's interesting, and that probably is carried on in your life. It all sounds very mindful, the reading and the out in nature and the walking, which I suggest it's very helpful with the work you're doing to get some headspace, reflect on whatever's going on.
Yeah.
I hear you. When you were growing up, when you were going to school, did you feel like you had your voice heard by others? And take that question as you will, whether that be adults, whether that be by your peers. Do you feel like you were heard and listened to?
And that's a really good question. And the honest answer to that, looking back, reflecting, is probably no.
Why do you say that?
And the reason I say that is that I think, and that it's from a personal perspective, not the structural points around was there a place for my voice to be heard. But sort of we touched on this at the very beginning around being. I was a very shy child, teenager. Perhaps less so when I was in my older teens, but I was very shy, very prone to not wanting to stand out or be noticed as such. So God knows how I wound up here.
I mean, that is a question that is coming into my head, but
so I didn't put my voice out there even, and it wasn't sought. That wasn't a time when people, I'm not saying it's how perfect now, all far from it, but it was, I just got on in my own little world rather than anyone.
So do you think it was, from what you just said then, it wasn't necessarily a personal thing? Obviously, that your own kind of your character at the time was, as you just explained. But do you feel like there was other people that were around you, maybe peers or not necessarily peers, but groups that you could see from from where you were, that were getting a voice heard, or was it just a different world? It was just like young people, that didn't happen.
I think it was, probably a different world. And also, I think it was a combination of both of those, because I think that, some people were, some children were just better at being bigger, brighter, bolder than I was. And that's also always been true. You've always had those characters.
But it's like, if you look into all these different cultures that have been around for millennia, and the different things and that they utilise, whether it be like talking sticks or whatever, circle chat and all the rest of it, to get everyone's opinion, that's where the gold is. Because Claire, sat over there saying nothing, might have the greatest idea that she's not been, being able to vocalise, and it's the same in communities, in businesses, in everything. Do you feel like, I'm ad-libbing here a little bit, I don't even know if that's the right word, but do you feel like that young people's voices should be heard, and they are heard now, based on your current experience, I suppose, and we'll talk more?
I think they should be heard, absolutely.
Yeah.
Are they heard sufficiently? No, we're not there yet.
Why do you think they should be heard? This might be obvious, but I mean...
One for them, so that they do feel they have that voice, so they do feel that they are being heard. We all want to be
valued.
Valued, thank you. That's exactly the point. So for them themselves, that's why it matters. But actually for us, because, when you're finding solutions to problems, when you're looking at the way through on, resolving issues, on making change happen, I can sit in my office and go, well, I think this is a jolly good idea. Why don't we just crack on and do that? The levels of unintended, if I do that through ignorance, without knowing what the experience is of the people that I want to make change for, then it's going to go wrong, and it's going to go badly wrong, and it's not going to change anything for the as effectively as it might.
Keep running into the same kind of,
keep hitting the same problems,
and or whatever. Yeah, exactly.
And so for me, I have to hear those voices. It's essential, because that's how you learn what's the best way through.
Well, I agree. I must admit, everyone I ask will say something similar. And I've got to be honest with you, and this is not me saying to you, but I have got to be straight. The stuff that we do all comes from the space of talking to young people, talking to people in the communities. And it literally is based on that, based on need, based on the wants and needs. If you start veering away in another way of working, you can still have a positive impact. It doesn't have the longevity. It doesn't have the deepness of impact. So, everyone knows different perspectives of people help, that melting pot of creativity and ideas that might support more than, a certain group. But, for example, we'll talk about your job now, but do you feel like young people's voices have really been heard and are influencing whatever's going to happen next with your role at the moment as a crime commissioner? Because my guess would be there's probably quite a lot of conversations with people, but in the end, who actually follows the thoughts and feelings of young people? And I would guess not many people. Sorry to put you, I'm not putting you, but I think it's interesting.
It's an important challenge as well. And so I'll give you an example of, the ways that we're trying to make this happen. And I'm not going to pretend I'm perfect, and I'm certainly not going to say I've got this sorted. Don't worry, I'm holding this. But one of the things I've been doing since I was elected is develop what's called a police and crime plan, and that sets the strategy for my term of office. And so every police and crime commissioner does this. You have a consultation, and then you come up with a plan, and it also goes on. So what I did this time round, which hadn't been done in the area before, was I drafted the plan first, but then went out for consultation. But again, online consultation.
What was the full process of drafting it first then?
Because I wanted to give some direction to the consultation. I think it's important. The priorities that are in there came from a whole range of conversations I'd already had around the region and in the sphere. But also what I wanted to do with the consultation is make sure we do hear the voices that don't normally respond. Police and crime plan consultation, not exactly the most exciting thing in the universe.
Well, I'll be honest, it's yeah, I'll say my honest bit in a minute, but it is that when you get the offer of like, oh, we want to do a survey on something, it's got to fit with the group that you're working with.
Yeah.
And at that particular time, because it's normally you've got timescales that you have to work towards, understandable.
Yeah.
And does it fit? And 9 times out of 10, it never does. And it's not for the want of wanting young people to have their voices heard. So it's like, it's difficult. You have a difficult challenge, but yeah.
So what we did with this consultation was not just have the online survey, but I did public forums as well. But crucially, we set up focus groups. And we had a young person, in fact, we had more than one young person's focus group as well, so that we could proactively go out and talk to young people and get those ideas in. Because the consultation was deliberately not a survey, it was a free form.
Yeah, good. Because that can be a barrier as well, can't it? A million things, the reading, the terminology, the formality,
and they can be directional as well. So it says, these are, of these 5
There's
answers,
many surveys
that
make things happen.
So we were grabbing we were soaking up information from that focus groups, and also it wasn't just about the wording of the plan, because we want the ideas of how to deliver, how do we make this plan real in the next 4 years. And so again, that was what we were trying to do through the focus groups too.
I'm not going to kind of dive in too much more with this now, because I'd like to get a bit more of a kind of a wider understanding of your career and of different things that you've done that's brought you up to this point. But I think I probably should ask this question now, because it's in my head and I will forget it. Is there anything that comes to mind now then? So you've gone through that process of building this plan that you could you could say that has come from young people. Do you know what I mean? Is there an example or something? Because I'm just interested to see what these things practically might be.
So it is them being involved. It is about that voice point. Okay. I think that's the headline. It's not the only thing. And like I say, we've worked on the plan as a document. The bit that I'm really excited about is this kind of action plan that we've got coming through, and we're still working through that. So that will be coming through in the coming months, and that will have more of the granularity. But overwhelmingly, it is that keep us involved.
Yeah, I would chuck something in there that good. It's like the part of being involved in things, like if they need to see that their influence not only matters by being at the table, that has impact, that makes change.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it will be another round of a million other things that have happened in the past through different organisations, where it is amazing that they're getting those experiences. It's going to help them in life moving forward. But actually, like the continued being involved in something and it not actually impacting on what happens is sometimes more negative. I'm not saying that's happening. I'm just putting it out there because.
But so there's practicalities of what actually makes what young people are telling us makes a difference. Yeah, it's opportunity.
Yeah.
What are the chances? Employment opportunities, education opportunities, skills opportunities, all of it. Giving people a chance, young people the chance to, develop, grow, become the person that they could, that they would want to be. That really matters. It's having a trusted space. Mm-hmm. We've seen a loss of 75% of our youth workers over,
and youth centres, government-run youth centres. I've just done my research recently as well for a chat that I'm going to do. But good. You're right. Yeah,
because that matters. That absolutely matters. And we've got to start rebuilding that resilience in our youth services sector, because some of that I can help with. It's a wider piece as well. So you've got those areas of support that young people want. There's a point around having someone to go to, a trusted adult for young people, that there's that support there. mentoring support for some young people as well.
Yeah, and you know, I'm not surprised by all those things you said, because probably they're the same things that we've been told by young people over X amount of decades, and the same things that get said at the meetings that you know have happened now and have happened in the past. And I get that your hands are tied to some extent about what you could do, but it is a wider piece.
Focus.
Yeah. Lisa Nandy, isn't it? Nandy, is it?
Yeah,
That's right. I said to someone the other day, I said Lisa Dandy by mistake, and it wasn't that clever. But it sounds like, so I spoke to someone from the National Youth Agency as the CEO there, and they lobby with the government. And one thing he said was that she's got absolute first-hand experience of seeing how youth work thrives in her own background, in a previous professional career. And I think that feels like it's more critical now than ever. It shouldn't make any difference about what one person means it's quite, you know, at the highest point in that part of the cabinet. But it does, because I'm working with young people that don't even know what youth work is now. Yeah. Because the system's been decimated for that long. Yeah. So you can't want what you don't know exists.
Exactly.
So it is even more of a tougher challenge now.
Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully it sounds like things are starting to go in the right direction.
And Lisa made an announcement this week on a national youth strategy, and that will be so that's going, and that's, I think, off the top of my head, I think the figure was about 100 million that there's going to be
and it's how that gets how it gets then spread around, and does it get to the right places. But I mean, it's positive. It's absolutely positive.
And I think what you said around Lisa's experience as well is really important, that is informing the decisions that are made. I would argue, and you would expect me to do this, that the current government, across the piece, not just Lisa, there's so much more experience in the current government that is relevant in their personal lives as well as professional lives.
It's interesting you say that, because I said to someone, I can't remember who we were chatting to the other day, and I know everyone, you know, like everyone, you're born into a family, born into a background, and it's a lottery, isn't it? It's like, it is what it is. There's no one's chosen to be where they are. But I did kind of make the point that probably you could probably argue that people in the Conservative Party have probably had less first-hand experience of youth work based on financial kind of geographical situations when they're growing up. I'm making the assumption. But then when I started thinking about the Labour Party, I mean, it's not like, you know, I don't know the ins and outs of everyone's background, but I don't think that it's the same kind of, you're coming out of the coal pit and, you know, like the unionists and all the rest of it. Maybe it is the case. I know there are a few people that you hear, that you know, that have kind of come from everyday communities and really understand the pressures that, you know, others are facing. But isn't that getting less and less? I actually think. I don't know.
Do you know what? I think it's actually more with our front bench. The person that immediately springs to mind, but she's not the only one, is Bridget Phillipson, who is our education secretary. Okay. So very relevant. Yeah. Came from a single parents family, free school meals. You know, Bridget really, you know, was, you know, if you want to read her background story, her upbringing, they had really tough times when she was growing up. You know, very loving mother, and you know, obviously, you know, she is herself, you know, now education secretary. Angela Rayner's another one.
Yeah, stands out.
Care worker, you know. Left school early, teenage pregnancy, all of these things, and you know, she is now Deputy Prime Minister.
More power to them.
Exactly that. I am proud of the Labour politicians and the diversity of backgrounds, and I will absolutely stand by. I think we've probably got more people now from what colloquially called a working class background on our front bench than we've ever had before.
It's good to hear. I mean, it's good to hear. That's my own bias kicking in there, but I mean, whatever.
Wes Streeting, our health secretary, again, another single parent, council house upbringing. So I could, I'll stop there, because otherwise they'll keep coming in.
No, but it's good. But I mean, it's good to know, because I have made the assumption that politicians maybe get into it now that, and this is all based on media and stuff I see. Obviously, I don't know any of these politicians, that they're professional politicians. They're specifically going for those roles. They're not people that have come through everyday kind of jobs and things like that and communities. They're targeting those kind of roles because they have a vision of wanting to be a politician. They haven't necessarily had those lived experiences. So it is positive to hear that. And I suppose it is worth me saying now as well, like, it doesn't matter who you vote for. People generally have good values, are well-meaning. And when I spoke to Lee Middleton the other day, who's the CEO of National Youth Agency, he was saying actually that there was lots of good people in the Conservative Party that really understood youth work and really understood the power of youth work. It's just difficult times, isn't it? There's so many other things that are out there that need support at a time like this. I guess it's the priority list situation. And it's like, all I'm getting at is I would hope that if people have got that lived experience of the power of those services, like I had, they would look at it more favourably because they know the difference it could make. Anyway, we have gone off on a little bit, but no surprise there. Welcome to my world. I'd love to know a little bit more about what you've done. So when you left school, what was your journey? Because you've obviously got, I had a little look on LinkedIn and your employment journey looks interesting. So please talk us through.
So I was not very good at school. I wasn't very academic at all. So I'm old enough to have done O-levels rather than GCSEs.
What are they?
Yeah, quite. And so, practically Roman times.
Crikey.
I got 5 O-levels. And I didn't get any A-levels at all. I did try sitting them, and then that didn't work. I tried resitting them and actually knew that was going to go the same way, and I was offered a job working in a restaurant in Portugal. I was working...
How does that come from that?
So I was working in a pub weekends and evenings, and the people there was a couple of who were working there as well, and they were just doing this over the winter, and they said, we're opening up a new restaurant in the spring. Will you come over and do front of house for us? And I went, well, the A-levels aren't going anywhere, so yep, I'll do that.
Sounds good.
And off I went to Portugal. So that's what I did in my late teens. I lived in the Algarve. And then when I came back, not long after I came back, a couple of things. I trained as a secretary because I'd always have work. That's technology's changed that world.
I can give you a job if you want.
There we go.
Slightly.
But then I also became pregnant.
Oh, okay.
In the terminology of the time, I fell pregnant. Okay. So I had my son.
That's funny terminology, isn't it?
It really is, the world of the archaic language. Yeah. But so I had my son as well. And then, so I did secretarial work, kind of brought up, I was obviously bringing up Ben. And then
Great name.
Exactly.
There we go.
Retrospectively, so proud. And obviously very proud of him. But also I then sort of went through a friend, and again, a lot of times what happens in people's lives is about what other people, how the influence of other people.
I'm already thinking this, but
when I was in my kind of early 20s, early to mid 20s, and Ben was at play school. A friend of mine who worked in a university said, why don't you do an access course? And so I did an access course. I did nighttime classes at the university. And
what was the course?
The access course is a kind of generalist course.
To get you ready to do a degree, yeah.
Because I had no academic qualifications, because they said you should do a degree. And so I did the access course, and then I started doing a degree.
In what?
So I started reading social psychology.
Ooh. Interesting.
It was really interesting. It was very, very interesting, but it wasn't the right course for me because...
Why did you start that course? What did you have a view of where you wanted to head?
So this is the bit I hadn't actually touched on, but while I was doing the secretarial work as well, I then also, alongside that, trained to be a hypnotherapist and psychotherapist.
Hello. If she starts doing any of this, Dougie, let me know. We'll be in trouble. Blimey. Okay.
Which was fascinating, and I did some work. So that was evening work because, when you're trying to manage your, sort of balancing life, family life and
not easy.
Kind of career and professional work
and
life.
learning and soaking it all
doing
up.
All of that. So and before the days of word processors as well.
Did you ever use the hypnotherapy and that kind of stuff? Did you actually ever do paid work with that? Or yes. Yeah. So you were doing the degree, hoping that those two things would connect together, and that would be.
Well, it seemed to make
your
sense.
Career path?
It was, some of this is kind of expectations of myself in terms of both my brothers had degrees. I felt that, it was something that...
Well, both your parents are teachers. Did they try and push you towards that or not?
Not so much, really. But, it was something that I felt it was a gap for me. And it's around those expectations. And I think this is a really important point around young people. And, it's the expectations that others have for young people. Things that you're recognizing their abilities and their capabilities and helping support them reach those. So it was pressure, not pressure, it was a desire in myself to get a degree. And it seemed to work, social psychology. But where hypnotherapy and psychotherapy was very much around working with individual brains, and there's a whole fascinating podcast in all of that and the wonders of the human brain.
No, I'm interested in that. Yeah.
Social psychology is much more around, if you like, it was more around what research that had already been done and crowd behaviours and group behaviours and that kind of thing, which in and of itself is really interesting, but wasn't my driving motivation. So I switched in the second year to do industrial relations.
What?
Yeah.
That's a curveball. And what is industrial? What's that? Industrial relations.
At the time, it was a much more common phrase, and it was around. I suppose some of it was around what we call human resources, but some of it was around trade unions and the kind of framework of employment versus employment and how that works for workforces and that kind of thing. And so that's what I did.
May I ask? It sounds like the first bite of the cherry was based on what you really wanted to do, because it showed it was an interest of yours, and it sounds like the second bite of the cherry with the industrial relations. I mean, I'm making the assumption. It doesn't sound like it. You're probably like dreaming of this thing that's going to nourish your your learning and all this kind of stuff. That doesn't sound like it's that, or maybe it is. Was that through connections with other people that were directing you, or is it something you've always wanted to do, and why?
So that wasn't it wasn't as clear cut as that. So I mean, the psychology side, clearly there was an interest already in that, or how the human brain works, the human mind works. Yeah. But the industrial relations was. I grew up in the 80s. I grew up in a very political decade. We'd had political conversations around the dinner table when I was a child. I was interested in politics. I was left-leaning, not always the case in my family, but I was definitely Labour-orientated, Labour Party orientated. And also, again, the time of the 70s and 80s, trade unions were a massive thing. It was big in the news that you would have Congress House, which is the sort of major trade union building, was on the headlines. The general secretaries of trade unions were well-known figures and were
I guess the obvious thing is all the miners' strikes,
the miners'
variety of other things that are going on with industry being privatised and
So it was a much more...
it sounds a little bit more exciting now.
Yeah, it was a much more exciting subject.
That's my ignorance.
Human resources makes it than human resources. It was much bigger and broader than that. And so I switched over to that, and I wanted to work, because of that kind of big and small P political instinct I had. The trade union movement seemed an obvious place for me.
Okay, so this sounds like it's setting us up nicely to then your career. So where have you worked? Like, maybe just kind of bullet point some of them, and hopefully I can jump in and question you a little bit about them, if that's all right.
So I started in desperate to get a job in the trade union movement. Took me a little while, but when I did, you start at the bottom. You start as a kind of basic, effectively the role was an organiser. Involved some recruitment, but it also
was
involved...
that a paid role? Or?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it was a paid role, and I was in Yorkshire at the time, living up in Yorkshire.
Okay.
And then that then morphed into, I then got promoted into working with an assistant general secretary of the union. He was doing what was called a negotiating assistant, so doing a lot of policy background, work with individual members, and also devising policies as well. Okay. And then moved on to become a national officer after that. So yeah.
So, what's the national officer? That you like? What is it? What's that?
So that was doing national negotiations. So I worked particularly in the finance sector. Okay. During the noughties, Royal Bank of Scotland was a Scottish bank. It wasn't particularly high profile. It didn't seem to be particularly big, but it took over NatWest Bank, which was a much, everyone thought a much bigger bank. Yeah. And then, but of course it was a massive merger, and it involved the negotiation of huge terms and conditions.
And were you part
of
that negotiation? Yeah. And did that,
absolutely.
Was that, so one thing that is coming into my head straight away is right time, right place. But connections are huge. I know you touched on this earlier on. Like you're 7 times more likely to get a job based on people that you know. Like that's just the reality of life. Yeah. That was part of the reason why we set up the GAP program that we've done, and connecting them with mentors that basically could help open doors, not give people opportunities, but help connect them. Do you feel like so it sounds like you've moved kind of quite quickly up to a national role, and it sounds like that's going to move again. Do you think any of that was because of people that you knew, or do you be honest, or do you think that it was because of just the ability that you had?
No, I was inside an organisation, and I think the moving to the negotiating assistant to the AGS, he absolutely effectively sponsored me, if you like. He was the one that wanted me to take on that role, and yes, throughout my work, I've had line managers or people I stayed effectively inside the same organisation. It kept merging, and then I kept finding new sponsors or people.
What do you mean sponsors? So they literally paid for the role, or
no, mentors, if you like. Okay. Yeah, that's probably a better description. Mentors who would be willing to give me a chance.
And would you say, so this is just a little bit of learning? It's learning from. Well, it's not learning for me, but it kind of is learning for me. That it sounds like making sure as you're moving up whatever food chain that might be, and that might not be on the cards or the agenda for other people, but it sounds like being someone that is connecting with other people within that workplace at maybe a higher level to you in a positive way is going to be huge, isn't it? I mean, this is saying the obvious things, but it sounds like, because I know, from my little look on LinkedIn earlier on, that you then ended up at number 10.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, you've navigated away to the Prime Minister's office? I mean, please explain that. I mean, it's amazing, but it'd be good to kind of understand the things to learn for other people that can impact on their day-to-day world, you know?
I would say perhaps the biggest part of it is always be open to ideas, always be open to opportunities. And, that was, I've been really fortunate in those. And so working in the trade union movement, also I was individually, separately involved as an individual Labour Party member as well in the Labour Party. And that just, as a consequence of that, I was asked to go and work in the political unit.
What was that like? Can you kind of explain to the rest of the planet that wouldn't necessarily be in that situation? What was it? You know, you've obviously worked in some high level kind of jobs as you've moved up in offices that I can imagine are very busy, but I guess that's like next level what you're talking about.
It was extraordinary. Absolutely. I mean, an immense privilege, but absolutely extraordinary. Yeah, that famous black door with the 10 on it, and that was my workplace front door. I mean, it's just it is absolutely. And there was always that moment of pinching yourself that that's.
I'm not surprised.
This is my workplace. I mean, I'm going to appalling name drop, but I shook hands with Barack and Michelle Obama. I
think a pretty big name drop is that you were. I mean, I don't know exactly what the name of the role was, but it was for Gordon Brown, the Prime Minister.
For Gordon Brown.
Honestly, I think that's pretty good.
And it was a fascinating job. It was, as you can imagine, no 2 days the same. It was a really interesting time of politics. We had the global financial crisis and responding to that, hence meeting the Obamas and that side of things. But also, there were moments of stress. Quite high stress. It was, Can
you just say maybe like one of those things that when you've obviously just thought of something, when you've said moments of stress, something must have gone ding. Can you just give us an example of what those things might have been? Be honest.
It was also the time when the MP's expenses became a huge news story. And of course, part of my role was working with the MPs and keeping that communication going with the Prime Minister. And that was a really stressful time because you'd get a heads up basically the night before what the theme or who the people were in the firing line for the Daily Telegraph story the next day. And, it was stressful because some of the things the MPs had done were, frankly, stupid. But some of the things were, they were, a story was being made out of. I mean, there was a story on the front page about somebody having had a bath plug.
Right.
I mean, I had no idea what the reason was, but, it was... but we had MPs that were literally on suicide watch over some of this stuff, that we needed to hold their hands through.
Their whole identity would be rolled up in that opportunity and the potential of losing that.
You're spot on, Ben. I mean, it was just really... It was a really... You didn't know what was coming next. You didn't know where it was coming at, and you didn't know who was going to be, kind of having to deal with it. So, and you're dealing with people. You're dealing with humans. You're dealing with their emotional responses as well, and that's often forgotten in politics. Politicians, whatever party, are people too. I know that sounds trite, but they have, they're quite. They deal with some quite stressful things.
Well, I can imagine that you saw more of the human side, this is part of the thing, is that if public facing, people don't necessarily see that vulnerability, then their thoughts of what a politician is based on what they see.
Yeah.
You've been, behind the scenes, haven't you? So I can only imagine what you've seen. I mean, I heard something with Boris Johnson the other day. Love him or hate him, whatever people's decisions are on that.
I have views. You can imagine.
I mean, I've got views as well, but it's not for me to start, pinning my colours to the flag. But whatever they are, they are. And I listened to him, and I remember thinking, Could you be honest and say to me, like, behind the scenes, were decisions made and were opportunities given to politicians based on conversations, based on friendships, allies, you do this, we'll sort you out? Because he was saying that kind of thing has always happened in politics, and as much as it shouldn't do, that's like normalised behaviour. And I remember thinking, no, freaking hell, that basically just fuels the whole Eton bloody
exactly
whatever, privilege. Sort out your mate. But he's implying that it happens in different ways within politics, full stop. And I remember thinking, bloody hell.
Of course he's implying that. Of course he's
but
implying that.
Does it happen in the rest of... I don't know.
That gives him a free pass. But when you look at those PPE contracts in the COVID, during COVID, that was unforgivable, the way they did that. Those, that fast track channel for getting PPE and masks, and the amount that was literally wasted on that. And I'm glad there's an inquiry into that now. So that was a different type of thing, and that old school tie network thing.
But I suppose what I'm saying, can I look,
I think
I agree with you, but
is
is it commonplace, the nepotism, the kind of sorting out your friends, you do this and there's a place for you in the cabinet kind of situation? I mean, I heard that, and I would make the assumption, I guess probably it is that. It would really pee me off if that was the case, but
if you... And maybe some of the reasons...
Because if it's not based on ability, then that is why we're always going to have this cap of, we come from here, they come from there, and the opportunities are always going to come to those that are, affiliate with the same background and all the rest of it as people that are higher up the food chain.
That's exactly the point I was going to make, which is maybe that explains some of the recent cabinets we've had. But, Keir now, Gordon before, Tony before Gordon, Tony Blair, you get the best people around the cabinet table. You are not doing it because they're mates. You're not doing it because of some kind of nepotism. You need a government that is strong. You need a government that's going to deliver change, because your political future depends on it. Winning elections depends on being good at government. And so, that isn't how cabinet appointments are made.
Good. I just suddenly started thinking of our friend Mr. Trump then, but I thought I'm not asking about that.
Again.
I just seen it. I seen something this morning. Yeah, let's not go there. So you've got into a situation when you're around a lot of people who have, a hell of a lot of influence. Can you give me an example of something that really you feel like made a huge change that you were kind of privy to seeing happening, or you were part of? The one, I know there'll be lots of things, but the one thing that you think, whilst in government, you like, do you know what? I was really proud to be on that watch, So
nothing is, there are lots of small things that I was involved in that I'm really proud of and really pleased with. But I would say that of that time, the big thing that I am so proud to have been a small cog in was the response to the global financial crisis, because Gordon kind of obviously led all of this, but it was about that decision to invest out of financial difficulty, that you actually don't go, right, we're just closing everything down, because the consequences of that on the economy generally, but on people's lives, that's jobs being lost. That's
it's going to impact on those that are no part of the wider problem.
Exactly, quite right. And so that counter-cyclical investment, as it's technically called, but that actual decision was really brave at the time. And as we know, was reversed after the 2010 election, but it really did make a difference. It kept people in work. It kept our automotive industry going. It kept, actually also was help, to kind of keep interest rates low, the whole quantitative easing thing. There's a long discussion about that as well. But I genuinely think that, those were the right decisions made in government at that time. And I think, the reason those decisions were made was because of the impact on people. It wasn't about economics as this is a theoretical decision we're making around
chess.
happening over there that is abstract. Absolutely, because the clear focus was, if we don't support the economy, people lose their jobs, people lose their homes. Yeah.
So just a quick question about that time. Did you spend any time with Tony Blair? And this is just from stuff obviously that I've seen on the TV. My guess would be that Gordon Brown was probably the brains of the political brains, but not of that partnership, because obviously everyone will have different skills. Yeah. But he didn't necessarily have the public persona that kind of, caught the imagination of the general public, which maybe a Boris has, and a Tony did, and all of them, Boris, Tony, and other people would have had lots of different skills that would have been huge. Would you say that Gordon Brown was the brains behind that movement?
Obviously, I mean,
there's lots of people.
Yeah, I mean, Tony was not short of brains himself either, and still does a lot of stuff. But it was one of those real sadnesses, if you like. I don't know if sadness is the right word, but
when you look in a football team, or you're looking at any team of whatever description, you know that people have different attributes and skills. Be honest. When you looked at the cabinet at that point, who was the person that you thought, actually they shine brighter than everyone else?
It was a lot of strong people, but Gordon is immensely intelligent. I mean, hugely intelligent. He's also very, very principled, and but it was always a great shame. He doesn't come over as well on the media as
he does
Tony
now.
Does.
It's just the sad thing is, I think he probably got hamstrung by the top job and how he should
and how busy
handle
he
himself,
was,
because when you hear him chatting now, and I see bits and pieces every now and then, he comes across so much better. It's a shame, isn't it? Because I think a lot of everyday people might warm to him more.
Yeah, and I think with hindsight, his reputation is building and building and building and growing. But at the time, there was, that a narrative builds up around someone, and there was this narrative built up that Gordon was somehow awkward, and all the negative press that was put around him, and some of it was actually really appalling. And it was never the man behind the front door. It was never, he is a good man, and he is, as I made the point, he was absolutely dedicated to public policy, being about changing people's lives for the better.
I can imagine there's probably a little bit if you keep getting told you're something, then sometimes you start thinking and acting that way, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. Like, it's no different than, young person walking around the street here, for example, and no one's been told, you ain't going to amount to anything. You're not going to do this. You're not going to do that. You're always causing trouble. You're always this. Whatever those things might be. Maybe, I know it's a completely different playing field, but if you're constantly, it's a drip effect, isn't it? If you're constantly hearing that you are a certain way, it's going to be difficult to then portray yourself in another way, because you've probably got that in the back of your mind.
I think it operates differently for older people to younger people, because I think labelling a young person has a real impact on their lives, and sometimes their life chances, often their life chances.
Well, definitely life chances in that situation, yeah.
When you're older, and this is, politics, you get a lot of media, obviously a media coverage, people pay a lot of attention to you. And I think what happens then is they pick a fragment of who you are and amplify it.
Yeah.
And
the most negative thing possible, probably.
Yeah. So I think it becomes less about that you get labelled and that you sort of lean into that labelling, and more about you feel the need to counteract it, because you're more than that. You're you've got other facets, but you feel that you have to change that narrative, and then you focus on how you change that. There's this whole thing about how Gordon couldn't smile on TV or whatever, so he tried harder to smile.
I feel it's going to be difficult to smile at a camera, let alone like...
Absolutely. Speaking as a smiler, I'm one of the world's kind of
smiling lucky people. But when someone, you need to do it, it's sometimes a different thing,
But
isn't
it's a different thing when you feel like that, when you kept being told you just look awkward and you look too serious.
Well, that's what I mean, the subconscious thing, where even if it's consciously, you are going to be thinking about those things.
Focus on those fragments rather than the whole, and the whole of Gordon is an extraordinary man.
Well, I mean, I don't want to I don't know that there's probably going to be other career moves from there. I think if we bullet point those now, and because I'd love to ask you more about politics, to be honest with you now. But I mean, I'm very aware that probably we don't how much time we have to talk about different things. But so, what did you do after that role? What was your next kind of career move after then?
So I went back to the trade union movement,
Okay.
and to be honest, I was pretty tired.
Right, I can imagine. Yeah.
In your life, but I was not done with politics either. So I continued having a kind of negotiating role in the trade union movement, but my next step was to go into frontline politics, to be a politician rather than working behind the scenes, and I stood in the European Parliament elections. Wow. In 2014, and was elected, so I became a member of the European Parliament for the Southwest.
So how does that... Oh, for the Southwest. I was going to say, how does that work? Do you have a constituency, or it's regional, is it?
It was regional. In fact, it was the Southwest and Gibraltar. So I also represent
How does that work?
Gibraltar.
My geography's not that good, but I'd say that don't work, does it? Surely.
So thereby hangs a tale. Gibraltar was covered by European legislation, or certain bits of European legislation, but it didn't have representation. So there's this old American Civil War.
So why did they put him on the Southwest then? Why the Southwest?
They chose the Southwest.
Go on, Gibraltar. That's weird, isn't it?
So I wound up representing the southwest of England and Gibraltar in the European Parliament. Obviously, it was before Brexit. We still were European.
What did you take from that experience then? If I had to ask you if you could kind of condense what you've taken from that next step in your career, what would that be? Because that's a huge experience. Huge. I mean, we could have another podcast on that, couldn't we?
Oh, delighted to do so. So I was an MEP from 2014 to 2019, and it was a period of two halves. It was the pre-Brexit period, and it was the post-Brexit period. Fascinatingly, my role in the European Parliament, I thought, would change after the referendum, and it actually didn't. My European colleagues said, "You're a legislator, you're a member of the European Parliament, we need you to keep doing your job," which was great in Brussels, and it was a fascinating role.
So after when Brexit had happened, your role didn't actually change?
When the referendum had happened,
right,
we hadn't left
so
the
no
EU.
decision had been made by this point?
We'd obviously, from my perspective, lost the referendum because I wanted us to stay in the EU, but nothing had... The agreement that was made about the divorce didn't happen until 2020, so we still had those remaining years. What did I take from that? There was so many things. I loved doing the legislation. It was detailed work. I worked on research programming and science policy and that side of things. I also worked on Eastern Europe as part of my delegation role, if you like, the foreign affairs work, which involved Ukraine. It involved South Caucasus, Georgia, and other countries. So that was extraordinary. And then, but also it was a whole political lesson around what happened around the referendum and what was going on this side of the channel. Frankly, I think there were so many lessons to be learned from that around the difference between the political story that's being told and the political reality and the consequence. And I think, that's a whole world of conversation.
I
would say that there are connections to what's happening with Trump, and I would say there are connections to what's happening in other parts of other countries.
Who does it benefit most by us being out of Europe? In this country, who does it benefit most? Like, honestly?
And honestly,
yeah,
the people that were partying were speculators that had made money out of us leaving the EU.
They were betting on it in some kind of way.
There were people betting on it. Absolutely right. And there were some elements that saw the chance to deregulate that would have, made in different areas like the finance sector and elsewhere. Not everybody, by no means everybody in those sectors, but some specific parts of those sectors. Overall, I don't see a benefit for this country. I don't see how it's benefited.
So if I said, and then this isn't necessarily my view, but it's, if I said to you that us having freedom from a European system that is not necessarily democratically be voted in, it's been there forever, what would you say to that? Like, is that not a positive thing, or what would be your...
Firstly, I'd obviously challenge the non-democratically, because I was I was democratically elected.
But the whole of the
European
system, I don't know. I'm just playing devil's advocate. But like,
very, very quickly, there's three parts of how decision-making, or three bodies involved in decision-making in the legislation. One was us, MEPs. The other one was the Council of Europe, which was elected governments.
I meant as in the people, did the people of Europe vote for this European project to actually happen in the first place? I don't know.
So
that's what I mean. It wasn't democratically put together, I don't think, from...
Well, it was done by democratically elected governments. So, the elected governments started this project off back after the Second World War. And, it was built out of a continent that had been at war and the devastation of that war. And it was also built in the shadow of the Cold War, what was happening on the other side of the Iron Curtain and what was happening in Europe.
Do you think we need to be back in Europe? Do you think we need to be part of that table again in a similar way or the same way as we were before? Honestly, to have a positive impact on the whole country. A quick yes or no. Or is it not as simple as that?
It can't be a yes or no, because it's not that simple. I would love us to be back in Europe. Yeah. I think the pain of the referendum, the social divisions and all the things we've got to do now, I think we need not to go back to the navel-gazing right now of that whole referendum period. But what we do need to do is rebuild our relationships with Europe. We need to work effectively with Europe. We've got global problems facing us. We've got climate change. We've got war in Europe. We've got all the other international problems. We've got, I would argue, that we've got to deal with all of those. And the best way we can do that is working with our allies in Europe and working with them very closely. Yeah,
I can only imagine it must be even more worrying based on, the other kind of governments changing in other parts of the world.
Yeah.
Our connection with Europe is going to be even more important now, probably. Yeah.
So we rebuild those.
Okay. I mean, like I said, I that is a monster, isn't it, of a conversation that we could have gone into loads more. But I suppose now really, your current role as the Police Crime Commissioner, and I'm sure there was other things that you've done after the last position you were speaking about, but to get to that now, what did you know about that role before you started it, and what was your hope? Because you obviously, you please say a bit about the Crime Commissioner job, but what was your hope and why did you want to do it?
So, the Police and Crime Commissioner role is one that it's got lots of facets to the job. It's got lots of different sides to it. So you've got part of it, a big part of it, is setting the strategic direction for Avon and Somerset Police. It's involved, and that involves obviously budgets, but it's also that policy direction, if you like. So that's a really a strategic role. It's not my job to get involved in the day-to-day operational work. That is foursquare with the Chief Constable and her team of officers and staff. But that strategic difference is what excited me about the role, because it is also bigger than policing. It's about that commissioning part of that role, and it's the influence and the working with partners, so working with the voluntary sector, working with local authorities, working with health, working with prisons, probation, all of this. And so it's a big job, sadly not very well known about, but the thing that made me really enthusiastic about taking up the position or trying to get elected into the job was it can have real impact. It's that, keep coming back to the word change. Yeah. Keep talking about how can we make change. And I really want to make a difference in this role. And I think there's a chance to do that. And my team, very familiar with me, kind of going, right, okay, how can we make a difference? How can we have impact?
So before you got the role then, and I guess you must have spoken to quite a lot of people about the opportunity. Should I do it? Should I not? What does it really entail? All those kind of things. I can imagine you're not just like, oh, great, I'll go for that. What were the things that you were being told from whoever the people were that you were connected with before you went for that opportunity, that were the problems, what were the things that were really well known, that were the gaps, the issues that you knew you would really have to work on hard to actually make a change like you're talking about?
So I think they're probably twofold, in sort of two headlines, if you like. One is the resourcing. The resources, it's that whole thing across the public sector of not enough funding, and actually the consequence, not just of 1 year's bad budget, you've just not got enough money this year. It's because it's been a downward,
systemic, isn't it?
ongoing over years.
I'm fully aware of that.
Yeah, exactly. And we talked earlier about the 75% loss of youth workers, and I was on a panel with the National Youth Workers Association at National Labour Party conference. And that was a talk. But this is across the policing, but also across local government. So that's the sort of thing that keeps you awake at night, of how do you square that circle of just not having enough people. Policing is a people business. Not having enough police officers, not having enough police staff, not having the resources as well, the financial resources. So that's the challenge. That's a challenge. But the other side, the other end of the challenge is also having that focus and working with partners. And again, I guess this is also resource related, but policing in and of itself is never going to be the whole solution. If you're talking about preventing crime, which is a passion for me, interventions, prevention, how you can't do that. I can't do that just going, right, even in Somerset Police, this is the strategic direction, these are the ways, that the routes we can make it. Because it's got to involve people like you, Ben. It's got to involve local authorities.
But there's not that many left. There's loads of passionate people, but there's not that many people with lots of experience that have got a committed role, that have got a team of people, that have got the qualified experience, lived experience, local people that work for them, because the pathway doesn't necessarily exist as much as what it has done in years gone by. And it must be the same for police. You don't have the same level of skill set at your disposal. You don't have the amount of resource or people at your disposal, so the impact is constantly gonna.
The impact has been massive over those years,
which impacts on the police, and it impacts on society, and it impacts obviously on youth and community and that kind of stuff. But
so those are the challenges. Those are the two major, big areas of challenge to my mind.
And I suppose from knowing that, and this might seem like an obvious question, but so knowing what those challenges are. And now being in a role for a while, and obviously working towards making a difference. Because I don't doubt that anyone in any of these roles doesn't want to make a difference. What are the things that you feel like could make some kind of difference in the kind of difficult situation that you're in? Because I don't think anyone can argue if you're trying to run something that has maybe worked better in the past because it had more resources, how do you try and continue to have a similar kind of impact with less? What would those things be? What are those things you're looking at?
So there's no single simple answer to that, because if there were a single simple answer, anyone would have done it.
Some ideas. That's what I'm getting at.
So there's individual kind of bits of work around how we make a difference. And I talked earlier about developing this action plan that's going to be sitting alongside the strategic policy direction will be the things that we can do. Some of those are directly police related, and it's about reinforcing the investment inside police into, for example, the early intervention teams. So, again, around that prevention piece and working with young people. It's around, my office runs something called the Violence Reduction Partnership.
VRU, I know it from way back with your predecessors.
Yep. So it's how do you build on that work? How do you make that work most effectively? So you
make sure the right people are doing the work.
Make sure the right people.
That's the problem.
And actually, you talked about this kind of the enthusiasm, the dedication that there is in the sector. It
doesn't last forever, though, does it? Because the reality of life kicks in and people get ground down, burnt out. And unfortunately, in limited spaces and places, without those skills that people actually can make a difference at the sharp end of things.
Yeah. But it's supporting people like you, Ben. It's making sure that we're in there in the corner with you, and that this is an idea, right? Or that you've got an idea and you say, right, Police and Crime Commissioner.
I've had many ideas,
you have
and believe me,
already.
I'd say it to lots of people, but I'm not sure they get taken up. But that's whatever. That's not.
So there's all of this. So it's focus. It's about focus, and it's about recognising focuses. How with the Violence Reduction Partnership, we've just brought in, just supported the funding to bring in a data and evidence person, so that we can go, because it's not just about
to
random
see what works. Basically, really,
it's not about randomly throwing things at a wall. It's about
And I bet that's happened in the past. I'm pretty sure. But anyway.
And a massive thing for me, because you say immediately before I was elected, I was chief executive of an equality and human rights charity, and I know what it's like, and it's been like in recent years, with you're constantly spending your time looking for funding, and it's short-term funding, so you can't do that.
How long is your role? Is it 4 years?
This role is 4 years.
Okay, so you have got time to kind of put those things in place because to see the impact, to know what's working, and then put more effort into those things and more energy into those things. Okay.
Yeah. And then recognising that in the prevention sphere in particular, I will be putting things in place that may not reap rewards, show impact until after the 4 years. But it's really important I put those things in place now so that young people get those alternative chances.
Yeah, I mean it's difficult. I don't know. I feel like easy. I could question and kind of delve in more about lots of things, but I guess the big thing for me is how do you feel like change is realistically going to happen? And I know this is a huge question, but I don't. If I start asking smaller kind of targeted things, then I suppose for you to give a kind of overall understanding of, based on the strategy, based on the plan, the kind of things that you're going to be pushing for, and the kind of things you think others need to do, because it can't all land on your plate and your role's plate and the crime commissioner. But what are those other things? Because there must be things that have come from this strategy and plan that you're like, look, this is realistic. We have not got the resource for that, but that needs to happen.
Oh, absolutely.
And who needs to do that? So let's just talk honestly about that.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
So that's always in my conversations often in my conversations with the team, is the opportunity cost. If we're doing this, what, let's be honest about what we're not going to do. I say it's often in my conversations. They may say to you, I'm always pushing things.
Please do roll through.
Those are on in almost sometimes they're day-to-day conversations, around, okay, let's
but
prioritise this.
For that plan and that strategy, and again, I'm not putting you on the spot, but if you can headlines.
So my priorities, the 5 priorities in the plan are reinforcing neighbourhood policing, and that's about connecting policing into communities so that those relationships are there and those that is all working. The second one is reduction in violent crime, and that's got 2 explicit strands of work underneath it. One is reducing serious youth violence, and obviously that has a knife crime element to it. And the other one is reducing male violence against women and girls. So those are the 2 clear strands, and they are connected as well. Clear strands.
If it's normalised behaviour at that age, then it's only going to continue through life, isn't it?
Massive impact.
And the trauma then ripples on. How do you, and what are the things, what are the actions with those particular, the ones you just said, those 2 strands, what are the action points that you feel like are going to work towards making the change? Some
of that is building on what's great work that is already happening and supporting that. And as you say, some of it is not just about me, it's also about those partnerships I'm building up and relationships. We've talked about this all through the podcast. Relationships matter, they can make a difference. And part of my role is to build relationships so I can then have the asks around what other organisations and what other, how other people can step into this space. Then it's around, we know what the trigger, the indicators are for how people are likely to choose one path or another. Those pivotal moments in their life.
The interventions that could happen at those points, and I know what they are. And to be honest, I've
you
spoken
can
about
them better than I can.
I think people get bored of it because it happens all the time.
Yeah.
But so if that's known, and there's those different trigger points with different characteristics for particular people at different times of their life, different communities, various different things, is part of your plan then to put those interventions in? And what are those interventions? I'll just be interested to know.
So some of this is in place already and it's building on that, but there are things like mentoring for young people. There are working with, and again, this is this kind of multi-agency. Actually, some of this is around, and there's a report recently that highlighted that in a particular part of the area. Some of this is around making sure that agencies are talking to each other, that information is being shared.
Even not just talking, they're talking in a meaningful way.
Talking is too
people turn up to these different meetings with other, and that's happened forever, but they're never actually really kind of doing something together because they're all got their own path and they have to fund themselves in the voluntary sector, and it's set up that way.
And this is very specific as well. This isn't just around, we have a partnership meeting or anything like that. This is around specific young people as well. That there is shared information about those young people, and I know
across services
that happens. That's a really important thing. I also have, we all have superpowers. Every one of us, we've got our own individual brand of superpowers. One part of mine is curiosity. I'm endlessly curious. I'm endlessly wanting to find things out.
Is that a strand?
That's some might call it nosiness as well, but anyway, I know I was in a meeting yesterday with the Home Office as well, and one of my colleagues, and I found out about some really good stuff that's happening in Merseyside in exactly this area. Well, I'm now following up on that, and I'm going to find out more about that to see if we can take that they're doing, model that works. Evidence-based.
Similar demographic or whatever behaviours.
Exactly.
The statistics align with the behaviours and actions of people that might then work here.
And they've got evidence to show that it's made a difference. Well, Why the hell aren't we doing it?
What is it? Is there a spoiler alert? No, sorry.
But this is the kind of stuff that I'll be bringing to this role. So
I think probably from everything you like, thanks for sharing that, and I know there's so much more we could talk about, and it's like, it's just the nature of the beast, isn't it? You've got many things to do. People won't want to listen to an 8-hour podcast, and I've got too many questions because I'm curious. But the intervention piece is always the thing that is like the most obvious, realistic thing that everything backs up. The stories from different sectors, youth community, education, the research from universities, the police will say it, social workers will say it, all these kind of things. And then, like jumping in there with mentors, don't get me wrong, it holds a massive place for those young people right at the sharp end of things. Are they going to engage in a group setting? No, they're not, because of their path and their situation. But how we don't have the spaces and the workforce in all communities where there has been that in the past, where we can then, once we start building those relationships with these young people that may be further at the sharp end of things, and I know that's like targeted specific work, but there is good organisations out there that can do it and people that do have the experience, then where do they go from there? Yeah. Because the trouble is, yes, there's the intervention bit, but then there's the other bit about you making a difference, building the trust in a relationship with those that are involved. Yeah. But then it's the socialisation kind of scenario. How do they move on next steps? Yes, you can try and support them into employment and that kind of thing. I mean, I was thinking the other day, this is part of the reason why GAP is for up to 30-year-olds. What is there for above?
That's a thing, yeah.
Like 20, people say youth work, and I'm like, don't get me wrong, I'm a youth work purist, but I'm not a purist in the age sense, because I think you have to adapt and change things based on what you're seeing and wants and needs. And if you think about young people that traditionally 8 to 19, 25 with SEN, special educational needs. Yeah. That's the case. That's not the reality now. Those people aren't moving out of home now because they can't afford to. There's limited jobs. The impact on young people through all the different crises, mental health, environmental crises, various other things. If you're living in a more kind of underserved, challenged community, the opportunity is going to be less for you. There's not even the community spaces when you're growing up, like the youth provisions. There are in some places, and they're doing really well in difficult circumstances, so there's more power to them. But they're not widespread. They're not here, there and everywhere. And that's another conversation we've had before in other podcasts about having one big place in the middle of South Bristol, for example. Everyone will have their view on it, That's a discussion for other times. But the reality is, if there's lots of young people that are growing up without those spaces outside of school, and then they get to a certain age range, and it's not even the pubs. There's not even those other community spaces, for people. Then the intervention's got to be the thing. And it's got to be rebuilding a semblance of something that will support young people before they go through the trauma and the challenges that impacts the rest of their life.
So some of this, you're right.
Put all your money into that.
I'm not going to solve this in all of this, but I am genuinely excited about the government has this in their sites as well.
Yeah, I know that's not.
And they've been so they've got what was in the manifesto called Youth Futures Hubs, and this is a commitment from the government because they get this. It goes to our earlier point about some of this is about their own lived experience, but also they get this from that data and evidence point. What makes a difference? So that is now being worked on. I've been in some of the conversations around this, but it's not finalised where this is going, but it is it is set out. It just needs
to get to the right, because the trouble is that the organisations that are kind of higher up the food chain will have more influence of having those conversations and those connections, relationships. And I think it's probably the same. I was thinking something that I was thinking when you were talking earlier about the plan. Like, there's lots of small organisations that have a huge impact on a shoestring that really make the difference day to day, that would never be at any of these tables and never be chatting to you. I mean, grassroots it's not big, but I'm having a conversation with you now, so I think I'm smashing it. But there is an element of that, so that there needs to be more kind of research into actually what is working, not just chatting on a surface level. But I wonder whether that's the same actually with what you're doing with the police. Because on the ground, the police officers day to day, they're out in difficult situations. They're experiencing everything that's going on.
Yeah.
Like their views on what worked, what has worked in the past, what could work in the future. Is that all part of this?
Of course. Yeah. And we actively, when I say we, I'm talking about myself in the office, we promoted, the consultation going out to police officers and police staff because of the point you just made, that it brings back in that expertise.
What's the again, like the highlight of what the kind of general theme of what has been said by police officers on the front line? What are they saying is needed?
It depends on which bit. I mean, again, just so many different elements to that because there's an astonishing amount that Avon and Somerset police do, but there is
with the VRU and the knife crime kind of scenario. Say with that, with youth violence. I mean, I know there's millions of other things, but particularly on that thing, what's their thoughts on the front line of what things have worked in the past that could work well now, or ideas for the future?
Yeah, and some of that is around a lot, kind of doing more of what's already been done. So the really expert early intervention teams that kind of are already engaged in and that partnership field, if you like, and they working around young people. So they've been very active and talking around. Talking to me around their work as well, and so some of that is where this comes in. But it goes back to the resources, and it goes back to just how stretched everyone is. Youth sector, policing. I want to be able to say, and that's great. There'll be 100 more officers in this sphere. I can't make that promise with the resources we have currently. So it's how we do more with what we've got.
Well, thanks for coming and talking more. I do wish you all the best with what happens. Obviously, we've all got a vested interest in society. I get the feeling that you're doing it to make a difference. Some might say it's a bit simplistic to say, what more can you ask? I just hope that whatever changes are coming, do have that positive impact, and it does start making a difference on the ground. And I'm sure it will. Thanks for coming on. We do finish the podcast with a quick question. I'm already questioning whether I'm going to ask you this, but I'm going to anyway.
Oh God!
It's called the What Really Matters podcast.
Yes.
And the question is, if you had to answer in whatever way you wanted, whether that be personal, professionally, however you take the question, what really matters to you and why? And don't think about it. First of all, it's the thing that comes into your head.
So, friends and family really matter, and purpose. The leaving roles, the world in a better place, having a positive impact. That matters. That purpose, that sense of purpose, that's what drives me, that social change.
Good answer. We'll take that. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you.